"Mommy, they're beating me." The words tore through the quiet Sunday afternoon like a siren. A few neighbors watering their gardens froze. A dog started barking. And in the small playground across Maple Street, a little black girl, no older than 7, came running barefoot, her tiny feet slapping the pavement, her face streaked with tears and dust. Her pigtails bounced wildly. Her pink dress was torn at the shoulder, and in her trembling hand she clutched a small, broken doll, the only toy she'd brought to play with that day. Behind her, 3 older kids, taller, stronger, and far meaner, followed at a distance. They weren't chasing her to apologize. They were laughing. Laughing as they threw small pebbles in her direction. Laughing as they shouted cruel words that made even the grown-ups nearby turn away uncomfortably. "Go back where you came from," one of them yelled. Another sneered. "This isn't your park." Their laughter echoed in the warm air, sharp and ugly. Across the street, Danielle Carter, the girl's mother, had just stepped out of the grocery store. She carried 2 paper bags filled with apples, bread, and her daughter's favorite cereal. But the moment she heard that voice, her baby's voice, everything else disappeared. The bags fell to the ground, apples rolling across the sidewalk, the bread crushed under her heel as she sprinted across the road. Her heart hammered in her chest. Every instinct, every ounce of motherly protection took over. "Baby, what happened?" she gasped, dropping to her knees and pulling the girl into her arms. The little girl clung to her mother's neck like a lifeline. "They said I can't play here. Mama, they call me names and then they push me down." Danielle brushed the dirt from her daughter's cheek, her fingers trembling as she looked around the park. The 3 bullies had stopped laughing now. They stood a few feet away, suddenly quiet under her piercing gaze. Around them, adults stood frozen. A few parents whispered among themselves, pretending to adjust their sunglasses or look at their phones. No one had done a thing. No one had stopped the bullying. Danielle could feel the sting rise behind her eyes, not just from anger, but something deeper, a pain that had been buried for years. Because she had felt this before. She saw flashes of her own childhood, standing alone on a school playground, hearing the same slurs, the same laughter, the same silence from people who could have spoken up but didn't. Her heart ached, not only for her daughter, but for that little girl she once was, the one who learned too early that some people would see her color before they saw her heart. Danielle took a slow breath, steadying herself. She looked down at her daughter, whose tiny hands still shook. Then she stood up, not just as a mother defending her child, but as a woman refusing to let history repeat itself. The crowd waited, and in that heavy, breathless silence, Danielle Carter decided this moment would not end like the ones from her past. Would you like me to continue this next section, where Danielle confronts the bullies and their parents, in the same detailed, emotional tone, about 500 more words? Danielle grew up in that same small southern town, the kind of place where neighbors smiled politely in the morning but whispered behind closed doors at night. The streets were quiet, the houses neatly lined up, and the church bells rang every Sunday. But beneath that peaceful surface, there was something unspoken, something that never truly went away. It was the same town where, as a little girl, she had walked to school clutching her lunchbox tight, pretending not to hear the names kids called her. "Why is your hair like that? Your skin looks dirty." She had learned to smile through it, to swallow the pain, to act like it didn't matter. She remembered one day, especially. She was only 10 when her teacher, after watching her raise her hand again and again, finally sighed and said, "Danielle, maybe let someone else answer. You don't always have to prove yourself." She hadn't meant to hurt her, perhaps, but the message was clear. Know your place. And now, years later, her daughter was living that same nightmare. Danielle looked at Amira, her little girl's face still streaked with tears, her small body trembling as she hid behind her mother's leg. Something inside Danielle broke, not just as a mother, but as that same little girl who once stood alone on the playground, wishing someone, anyone, would stand up for her. The bullies' parents came rushing over, their footsteps heavy on the grass. One of them, a tall man in a faded baseball cap, folded his arms across his chest and said with a smirk, "Your kid just got a little roughhousing." Don't make it a big deal. Danielle blinked in disbelief. A little roughhousing, she repeated softly, her voice trembling but steady. You watch your kids hit mine and didn't stop them. The man shrugged. Kids fight. It's part of growing up. Another woman, wearing oversized sunglasses and a bored expression, rolled her eyes. Maybe she shouldn't be playing here, she muttered. Our kids just... Don't you dare finish that sentence. Danielle's hand came up, palm open, her voice slicing through the air like a whip. The woman froze mid-sentence. The park went silent again. Even the birds seemed to stop singing. All eyes turned toward Danielle. Some people expected her to scream. Others braced themselves for a scene. But Danielle didn't scream. She didn't curse. She didn't let her anger control her. Instead, she closed her eyes, took a slow, deep breath, and when she opened them again, her expression had changed. No longer just a mother defending her child, but a woman standing against everything this town had silently tolerated for far too long. Her voice was calm, but every word carried weight. I grew up here, she said quietly, in these same streets. I know what it's like to be told you don't belong, and I won't let my daughter grow up thinking that's normal. The crowd stayed frozen, parents shifting uneasily, kids looking down at their shoes. Danielle's words hung in the air like thunder before the storm. Everyone waited, expecting her to lash out, to demand punishment, to unleash her fury. But instead, she took a single step forward, knelt beside her daughter, and said softly, It's okay, baby. Mommy's here. Then, standing tall, she faced the other parents again, her calm stronger than any scream. And that's when everyone realized something they hadn't before. Danielle Carter didn't need to raise her voice to make the world listen, because the truth in her silence was louder than any shout could ever be. The air in the park hung heavy. No one dared to move. The bullies, 3 children who had looked so confident just minutes ago, now stood awkwardly, their eyes darting between their parents and the ground. Their laughter was gone, replaced by silence and shame. Danielle took a slow step toward them, but instead of shouting or demanding punishment, she knelt down so she was eye level with the kids. Her voice was calm, the kind of calm that made everyone listen. Do you know what it means to be kind? She asked softly. The oldest boy fidgeted with the strings on his hoodie. The girl beside him kicked at a pebble, avoiding eye contact. None of them said a word. Danielle waited. Then she continued, her voice steady, carrying years of pain and wisdom. When you hurt someone because of how they look, it doesn't make you strong. It doesn't make you popular. It doesn't even make you funny. It just makes you smaller inside. She placed a hand gently on her daughter's shoulder. See her? She said, nodding toward Amira. She didn't do anything wrong. She just wanted to play. But you decided she wasn't good enough. Do you know how that feels? The little girl who'd been teasing Amira earlier looked up, her eyes wet now. She whispered, No, ma'am. Danielle nodded slowly. Then promise me you'll never make anyone feel that way again. The children didn't answer right away, but something in their faces shifted, a flicker of guilt, a glimpse of understanding. Then Danielle rose to her full height and turned her attention to the adults standing nearby. Her gaze landed squarely on the man in the baseball cap, the one who had called it roughhousing. You can keep making excuses for your kids, she said, her tone still calm but sharp as steel. Or you can teach them how to treat people. Because one day, life will teach them. And trust me, life's lessons are a lot harsher than mine. No one spoke. The man's jaw tightened, his wife looked away, and a few onlookers shifted uncomfortably. Danielle didn't wait for a response. She simply reached for Amira's hand. Come on, baby, she said gently. Let's go home. But before she turned away completely, she did something no one expected. She took out her phone, opened the camera, and began to record. Her hand trembled slightly, but her voice was clear, filled with truth, pain, and power. This is for every parent watching this, she began. Today, my daughter was bullied in front of adults who stood by and said nothing. If you teach your kids hate, they'll grow up spreading hate. But if you teach them love, they'll change the world. There was no anger in her tone, only heartbreak and hope. She stopped recording, pressed upload, and slipped the phone into her pocket. That night, she didn't think much of it. She tucked Amira into bed, kissed her forehead, and whispered, "You're beautiful just the way you are." But when she woke up the next morning, her phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Notifications flooded her screen. Her video had gone viral. 5 million views overnight. Hundreds of thousands of comments from mothers, fathers, teachers, and strangers around the world. Some said her message made them cry. Others said they showed it to their children before school that morning. And one comment, pinned at the top, read, "This woman didn't just protect her daughter. She protected every child who's ever felt different." Danielle stared at the screen, speechless. She hadn't meant to start a movement. But sometimes, all it takes is one mother's calm voice to make the whole world stop and listen. By morning, Danielle's phone was overflowing with notifications. The soft glow of the screen lit up her tired face as she rubbed her eyes and opened her messages. At first, she thought it was a glitch, a few likes, maybe a handful of comments. But then she scrolled, and kept scrolling. Her video, the one she'd filmed with trembling hands and a breaking heart, had reached millions. Her face was on news feeds. Her voice was echoing in classrooms. Her words were being quoted by parents all around the world. Hashtags flooded social media. Hashtag teach love not hate. Hashtag Danielle Carter. Hashtag kindness begins at home. Danielle sat on the edge of her bed, completely still, as her daughter came running in. "Mama, why is your phone making so much noise?" Amira asked, giggling. Danielle smiled, brushing her daughter's curls away from her face. "Because, baby," she said softly, "people heard our story." She opened one of the messages. It was from a teacher in Chicago. "I played your video to my students today. They cried. They asked if they could make posters that say kindness lives here. Thank you for being brave." Another message read, "I showed your video to my son. He apologized to a classmate he teased. You changed something in him." Tears welled in Danielle's eyes. She hadn't expected this. She'd recorded that message as a plea, not a performance. But now, it had become something much larger than her pain. And then, there was a knock at her door. When Danielle opened it, she froze. Standing on her porch were the parents of the bullies, the same man in the baseball cap, his wife, and their kids. In the man's hand was a bouquet of flowers, slightly crushed from how tightly he was holding it. He cleared his throat, his voice quieter than before. "I saw your video," he said, "and I realized I wasn't just watching my son act wrong. I was showing him how to act wrong. I am sorry, Daniel. Truly." His wife nodded, tears in her eyes. Their kids stepped forward, holding small apology notes they'd written themselves. Amira peeked out from behind her mother's leg, shy but curious. Danielle looked at them all, the parents, the kids, the awkward silence between them, and she smiled gently. "I don't want revenge," she said. "I just want change." That moment could have ended right there. An apology, a few words, and a quiet goodbye. But Danielle had something else in mind. She invited them in for lemonade. And as they sat around her small kitchen table, she shared an idea, a community program where kids of every background could learn together, play together, and talk about kindness. A week later, with the help of volunteers, flyers went up around the neighborhood. It was called the Kind Hearts Project, and the same park where Amira had been bullied became the first meeting place. Dozens of kids showed up, some from Danielle's neighborhood, some from other towns who'd seen the viral video. There was laughter, painting, music, and storytelling. Danielle stood by the swing set, watching her daughter and the same children who once hurt her now sharing snacks and giggling together. A local reporter filmed the moment. "Danielle," she asked, "did you ever imagine your story would reach millions?" Danielle smiled. "I didn't do it for millions," she said. "I did it for one, my daughter. But maybe, just maybe, one can turn into many." That evening, as the sun set behind the park, a new mural was painted on the playground wall. In bold, colorful letters it read, "Kindness lives here." And underneath, in smaller print, "Inspired by Danielle and Amira Carter." 3 months later, the park didn't look like the same place anymore. Where there had once been bare, gray walls and broken benches, there were now murals bursting with color. Handprints of every shade, drawings of children holding hands, and a giant rainbow stretching across the side of the playground slide. At the center of it all, Painted in bold, warm letters were the words, "Kindness lives here." The phrase had become a movement, printed on T-shirts, posters, and school banners across the town. What started as one mother's plea for empathy had turned into something far greater, a community reborn. That afternoon, the sun poured golden light over the park. Laughter floated through the air, the kind of laughter that makes you stop and smile without realizing it. And right in the middle of it all was Amira. Her pink dress fluttered as she ran, her curls bouncing with every step. But this time, she wasn't running away. She was running toward something, toward the same kids who had once made her cry. "Tak, you're it," she giggled, tapping one of them on the arm. The boy laughed and chased her, his earlier cruelty replaced by pure joy. Nearby, another group of kids sat cross-legged on a blanket, painting kindness rocks with bright colors. Words like love, hope, courage, and respect written across them. They were going to place the rocks all over town, so anyone who found one would remember, you matter. On a park bench not far away, Danielle sat watching quietly, her hands clasped around a cup of coffee. Her eyes shimmered with pride as she saw her daughter, no longer the scared little girl from that day, but a symbol of change.